That night, the sky was overcast, and the persistent rain fell steadily, tapping rhythmically against Lucas's car window. He was driving his sleek black sedan, the dim streetlights reflecting off the puddles along the deserted street. The windshield wipers worked tirelessly, but Lucas's mind was elsewhere. He was lost in thoughts about the crucial meeting scheduled to take place in just 30 minutes. This meeting would determine the future of his company, a turning point that could open immense opportunities or push him into a dead end. Accompanied by the rhythmic sound of the wipers, Lucas mentally rehearsed every line of his presentation, imagining the reactions of his potential partners, their probing questions, and the tension he would have to face. As his car stopped at a red light, an unexpected sight appeared before him, instantly dissolving all the worries swirling in his mind. Under the dim glow of the streetlights, a young woman sat huddled on the sidewalk, a tattered blanket wrapped around her, clutching a drenched child tightly in her arms. Both were being battered by the cold rain, and the darkness seemed poised to engulf them. The scene struck a painful chord in Lucas's heart. A quiet voice within him stirred, urging him with a command he couldn't ignore. Don't just drive by, help them. He shook his head, trying to dismiss the relentless thoughts. I can't stop, he told himself, his hands gripping the steering wheel. There are more pressing matters. Life isn't always that simple. Yet, no matter how hard he tried to convince himself, the image of the woman and child refused to leave his mind. A growing sense of guilt began to envelop him, forcing him to reassess the world around him. As the traffic light turned green, Lucas accelerated, but an unease lingered with him throughout the drive. Moments later, after he had left the area behind, another figure unexpectedly appeared in his rearview mirror. A man in a black coat and hood, striding quickly toward the huddled woman, his movements menacing. Lucas felt his chest tighten. The woman tried to stand but stumbled, letting out a panicked scream as she clutched the child closer to her. In an instant, Lucas made a decision. He slammed on the brakes, bringing the car to a screeching halt, and hurriedly stepped out into the pouring rain. The cold seeped through his clothes, but he didn't care. As Lucas approached, the man noticed him and swiftly turned away, vanishing into the darkness like a shadow, leaving no trace behind. It all happened within seconds, but it was enough to completely change a man. Courage had triumphed over hesitation. Lucas approached the woman and immediately noticed her eyes. Deep blue, filled with anxiety and fear. Her body trembled under the cold rain, her soaked hair clinging to her pale skin. Are you all right? Lucas asked gently, extending a hand as if to help her. She looked up, her gaze filled with surprise and despair as she faced a stranger in the night. I don't know, she replied, her voice choked, breath short as though pleading for rescue. Her shoulders quivered, not just from the cold but from the overwhelming pain consuming her. Lucas glanced down at her feet, where a visible injury was causing her great pain. Her legs were so badly hurt that she could no longer walk. Your leg looks serious, he remarked with concern. The woman sighed, her breath heavy with exhaustion and resignation. I've been hurt since this morning. A man chased me for 2 blocks, and I fell trying to escape. Her voice cracked as she tried to soothe the crying child in her arms, the baby's face red from hunger and fatigue. Lucas listened, his heart tightening with empathy. He scanned the surroundings but saw no sign of the attacker. but though a lingering unease hung over him. "Do you know who he is?" Lucas asked, his tone filled with concern. The woman shook her head, her fearful gaze flitting over him before finally settling. Taking a shaky breath, she spoke. "It's my ex-boyfriend," she said, her voice trembling. "I've been trying to get away from him, but somehow he always finds me and tries to take me back." She held the child tightly to her chest, as if it was her only means of protection, her eyes betraying a deep, unshakable fear. A growing unease stirred within Lucas. He looked at the woman, then at the child still crying in her arms, its cries piercing through the night. "Let me take you to the hospital," Lucas said firmly. "It's not safe here." He gently helped her to her feet, feeling the frailty in her as she leaned against him. Her legs were too weak to hold her up, and each step she took seemed to cause unbearable physical pain. As the car rolled through the deserted streets, the steady rhythm of rain tapping against the windows created a somber backdrop, but inside, the air was heavy and silent. Lucas kept his focus on the road, determined to get her to safety. Yet a whirlwind of curiosity and concern about the woman sitting next to him lingered in his mind. Unable to endure the oppressive silence any longer, Lucas glanced at her, his eyes filled with genuine concern. He gently broke the quiet. May I ask your name? And the baby's?" His voice was soft and respectful, like an invitation for her to share the story she'd been holding within. The woman lifted her gaze, her eyes clouded with exhaustion and sorrow. Taking a deep breath, she softly replied, "My name is Emery, and the baby is Quinn." "Quinn," Lucas murmured, the name resonating with a sense of innocence and purity that the child embodied despite their circumstances. He could hear the pain in Emery's voice, and each word carried a weight of despair. Hesitantly he asked, his voice trembling slightly, "Emery, if it's not too much, could you tell me what brought you to this point?" Emery fell silent, as if sifting through memories too heavy to carry. Finally, she spoke, her voice faint and laden with exhaustion. "It all started after my mother passed away," she began, clutching the tattered blanket around her tighter, as if it offered some semblance of comfort. Her voice wavered. "My father remarried, to a woman I hoped would care for me, but I was wrong. She and my father began to hurt me. I was just a little girl, helpless. The beatings, the harsh words, they became routine. That house wasn't a home. It was a prison of bitterness and pain." She paused, her eyes distant, as if replaying the painful scenes in her mind. "When I was 15, I decided to run away. I left that house, thinking freedom, even with nothing, was better than staying. I thought I could find peace, a new beginning. But I didn't know how harsh the world could be. It was just me, a 15-year-old girl wandering the streets, invisible to everyone, surviving on scraps and fleeting moments of kindness." Her voice broke, and Lucas felt a pang in his chest, the rawness of her story cutting through him like a blade. She paused, her hands dropping to her sides, her eyes heavy with sorrow. "After 5 years of living in solitude, I met him. I thought I could start over, love someone, and build a family. But I was wrong again. He was no different from those who had hurt me before. He got caught up in gambling, piling up debts, and constantly beating me. When I became pregnant, he told me the child meant nothing and that I didn't deserve a happy life. I I didn't know what to do anymore. My life just kept spiraling downward with no way out. Tears began to fall and she hastily wiped them away, unable to hide the pain rising within her. I ran away again, carrying this innocent child with me, but I had nowhere to go, no one to help me. I thought I would never see the light, that I would always be trapped in the darkness of this painful life. Her voice grew weaker, as if all her strength had been drained with those words. I tried, but it feels like fate keeps pushing me onto paths filled with suffering, as if my life was meant to be a constant trial. And now, here I am, running again, once more, finally. After what felt like an eternity, Lucas's car stopped in front of the hospital. The rain continued to pour, but it no longer seemed to matter. He quickly stepped out, hurrying to help Emery out of the car, guiding her and the child inside the hospital, where the stark white lights and cold air of the emergency room offered a sense of safety, albeit tinged with somberness. Inside, Lucas looked around before heading straight to the reception desk. Pulling a bank card from his pocket, he handed it to the nurse behind the counter and spoke with earnest determination. "I'll cover all the expenses for her and the baby. Please make sure they get the best care possible." The nurse looked at him, her eyes a mix of curiosity and gratitude. "Thank you so much. We'll take care of them right away." When Lucas stood in the hospital room, watching Emery and baby Quinn being taken into the emergency ward, his phone suddenly rang, interrupting his thoughts. He glanced at the screen. It was his assistant calling. Her voice was urgent. "Mr. Lucas, the important meeting is about to start. You need to get here immediately." Lucas hurriedly drove through the rain-soaked streets. The critical meeting and everyone waiting for him weighed heavily on his mind, yet the image of Emery and Quinn lingered, refusing to fade. Finally, after about 30 minutes, Lucas arrived at the office. As he stepped into the meeting room, the atmosphere was tense. All eyes turned toward him, and he could feel the discomfort from his colleagues. Jason, a member of the team, leaned back in his chair and spoke the moment Lucas walked in. "You're 15 minutes late, Lucas, and right in the middle of a heated discussion. Do you realize that?" Lucas sighed, making an effort to remain composed. "I apologize, everyone. I had an emergency to deal with. But I'm here now, so can we get started?" Lucas quickly moved to the head of the table, opened his laptop, and began his presentation. The slides projected onto the wall displayed detailed charts and forecasts, each figure meticulously prepared to persuade and impress. While speaking, his mind occasionally drifted back to the images of Emery and Quinn, but he channeled those thoughts as motivation to sharpen his focus on the task at hand. Despite the tension at the start due to his tardiness, the meeting gradually smoothed out. The initial irritation on the faces of his colleagues gave way to nods of agreement and murmurs of discussion. Lucas, with his confidence and experience, steered the meeting skillfully. He tackled challenging questions, addressed hypothetical scenarios, and defended his position with precision, resembling a seasoned strategist at work. When the final slide was presented and the last question was answered, the room fell silent, a quiet respect filling the space. Suddenly, Peyton, a female partner in the meeting, stood up. She was the first to break the silence, offering a proud smile. "Congratulations, Lucas. Once again, you've delivered an excellent pitch, even with the delay," she said. "Oh," Lucas nodded, allowing himself a moment of satisfaction before closing his laptop. "Thank you all for your patience and participation. I truly appreciate this trust, and I assure you, the results will speak for themselves, he said, his gaze filled with determination. He grabbed his laptop, quickly closed it, and stood up. Thank you, everyone, he said swiftly, then walked toward the door. Lucas, aren't you taking a break? Peyton called after him, but he merely smiled and nodded. No time, I need to go, he replied, then hurried out of the room, his mind focused entirely on the hospital. The tense moments of the meeting were now a thing of the past. He had to make sure the two women were safe and well cared for. As soon as he stepped outside the building, he rushed to his car and sped off. At that moment, nothing was more important than ensuring they wouldn't have to face hardships alone anymore. Lucas entered the hospital, the heavy rain still falling outside, but his heart had calmed slightly. He thought about the two of them, hoping they had received proper care and were safe. However, when he approached the reception desk, the nurse informed him that they had been discharged and left without leaving any information. Are you sure? Lucas asked, his voice tinged with worry, a sense of unease rising in his chest. Yes, they left after receiving treatment. They didn't leave a phone number or address, the nurse replied, her expression somewhat puzzled. His heart sank, but there was no time to think further. He took out his phone and checked his credit card notifications. His eyes were fixed on the screen as he saw a series of transactions that had just occurred: a TV, a gaming console, and several other electronics. These were not items that matched the situation the girl had shared. A wave of frustration surged through him, and he frowned, a dark thought creeping into his mind. Unbelievable, Lucas muttered, gripping his phone tightly. He couldn't believe that the girl had taken advantage of his kindness in this way, running away without a word of thanks and even using the credit card he provided to buy meaningless things. But then a thought crossed his mind. Could this all just be a scam? The unease didn't stop there. He decided he couldn't let this go. His mind was spinning, and the pieces started to fall into place. These transactions couldn't be random, and he was certain something was suspicious. It wasn't the girl. It was another man, the one who had attacked them on that rainy night. Used this credit card? Lucas thought, his anger rising. He decided he had to find a clue to confirm whether this man was behind it all. Stepping out of the hospital, he drove in a tense mood. His eyes scanned the street corners, looking for any trace, while his mind continuously analyzed the smallest details. As night fell, his determination grew stronger than ever to uncover the truth, no matter what difficulties lay ahead. In the following days, even though work kept pouring in and everything seemed to return to its normal course, Lucas couldn't get Emery and Quinn out of his mind. The images of them, the suffering mother and the abandoned child, kept replaying in his head, and there was no way to push them away. Even though she was just a stranger in his life, what she had to endure made it impossible for him not to care. Then one day, as Lucas was working in his office, the phone rang. He looked at the screen and saw an unknown number. Picking up the phone, he couldn't help but be surprised when he heard the familiar voice, though it was faint and trembling. "Hello, Lucas. It's me, Emery." Her voice came through, hesitant. "Emery?" Lucas was taken aback, but he also felt a sense of relief that he was finally getting news from her. Are you okay? You and your daughter?" Emery was silent for a moment. Then a soft sigh came through the phone. We have to run again. I'm sorry about the credit card. Can you understand? I had no other choice. That card, It was my ex-boyfriend's. He took the card and spent all the money on it when I was forced to leave the hospital. Where are you? He asked, his voice lowering with concern. I can help. I can't let you and your daughter end up in this situation. I can't tell you exactly right now, you understand. I have to keep moving. I can't stop for long. But I just want to thank you for your help. And I'm sorry for all the trouble I've caused. Her voice cracked as if exhaustion had seeped into every word. Emery, he said firmly, remember, you don't have to do this alone. If you need any help, I'll always be here. Protect yourself and Quinn, and I'll find a way to help. The call ended, but Lucas's mind could not settle. He knew he had to find Emery and Quinn and protect them from the dangers that loomed ahead. It wouldn't be easy, but he wouldn't let her walk alone in that darkness anymore. As for Emery, after hanging up, she sat alone in the cramped room, holding her young daughter close. Yet, her heart felt cold and empty. Looking at the child in her arms, she felt a lump in her throat. Quinn was still too young to understand the pain her mother had been through, but Emery knew that no matter how much she tried to hide it, the wounds in her heart were silently bleeding, and the painful memories haunted her every day. She recalled the times when she was just a little girl, always running away, always the one left behind. She had never known what it meant to be safe, to have a real home. Her mother passed away when she was very young, and her father, instead of caring for her, became the one who pushed her into nightmares. The stepmother took her father's place, but instead of offering love, she only brought pain. Emery had to run away when she was just 15, stepping into a life without love, without protection. And now, after all these years, she had to run again, but this time for Quinn, because she didn't want her child to endure the same horrors that she had. She thought back to the times her ex-boyfriend had beaten her when he grabbed her and used cruel words to humiliate her. Emery felt as though her body was rotting. Why had her life turned out this way? Why were there always these cruel men who made her feel undeserving of love, undeserving of happiness? Every time he looked at her with cold, contemptuous eyes, she felt like prey being hunted. No matter how much she loved him, he never saw her as a person. To him, she was just an object, something to torture. As Emery looked at Quinn, peacefully sleeping in her arms, a wave of sorrow rose in her chest. This child, born from pure love, now had to grow up in a world full of pain and fear. Emery hated herself for not being able to give her daughter a better life, for not being able to protect her from the constant dangers lurking around them. She felt helpless, as if everything was falling apart right before her eyes. "Hey," Alan called out, turning around to face him, his face smooth and peaceful. There were moments when she just wanted to give up, to end it all, not just for her own sake, but for Quinn as well. She didn't want her daughter to live in this world, a world where only cruelty and contempt existed. She no longer knew where to go or what to do. Running away was just a reflex. But how long could it last? She couldn't keep living in the shadows, constantly trapped in fear. But the greatest fear wasn't for herself, it was for Quinn. She couldn't let this child live a life like the one she had endured. As she looked up at the empty walls, loneliness filled every corner of her soul. A chilling fear settled in. She sat back down, holding her daughter's hand with only one thought on her mind. She had to get far away. Suddenly, she heard a strange noise from outside, a dry sound like the footsteps of someone approaching. She dared not breathe too loudly, her eyes wide with panic as they scanned the window. In the darkness, A shadow stretched across the yard, and when she squinted through the binoculars, terror swept over her. It was him, her ex-boyfriend, standing there with a face full of rage and madness, his eyes sweeping across the dark corners of the building as if searching for someone. Emery felt her legs go weak, unable to move. But deep down, she knew. If he found her this time, it would be the end. She had no hope left, no salvation but herself. She couldn't let Quinn witness her being tortured by him again. Every second felt like an eternity of darkness, the fear tightening around her. "No, I can't let him in," she whispered to herself, her hands trembling as she grabbed the phone, his face hot with fear. She turned away, but not before seeing Ellsworth peer at him. She knew that at this moment, there was only one person who could save her. She quickly dialed Lucas's number, her palms slick with sweat, her eyes burning with fear. By reflex, she began to cry as the phone started ringing, the sobs choking her and making it hard for her to speak clearly. She could only gasp for air, wiping her tyrannousness off her face. When Lucas answered, Emery's voice, weak and trembling, echoed in the phone, like a cry for help reverberating in the darkness. "Lucas, yeah, he's outside the door. You have to come immediately. Hurry, I don't know what to do. I can't hide anymore. He will... Oh, I'm so scared." She tried to speak through her frantic breaths, but she could only sob, the fear almost swallowing her whole. "Emery, listen to me. Stay calm." Lucas shouted over the phone, his voice firm, but his worry evident. "Your address. Tell me quickly. I'll be there right away. Don't worry. I'll save you." She hurriedly read the address in panic, her hand shaking as she held the phone, almost unable to speak. Each word she managed to say seemed to choke in her throat, unable to contain the overwhelming fear. But she had finished, and Lucas's voice felt like a spark of hope in the darkness. "Don't worry, I'll be there soon. Hold on to Quinn, keep her close. Don't let him get near, I'll protect you." Lucas's voice was firm, full of determination. Emery heard the sound of an engine revving from the other end of the line, and a weak flicker of hope rose within her. But there was no more time. He was getting closer, his shadow like a nightmare creeping into her life. She quickly locked the door and drew the curtain shut, her hands trembling from the tension. She held Quinn tightly, placing a finger to her lips to keep the little girl from waking, then sat down in the corner of the room, her heart pounding like it would explode. The fear was indescribable, only desperation closing in around her. But at this moment, she had no other choice but to wait for Lucas. Her life, and Quinn's, now depended entirely on one person, Lucas. Lucas sped down the road, his hands gripping the steering wheel, his eyes fixed on the path ahead. Every second felt like a century, his heart full of worry and tension. Emery and Quinn's lives were now in his hands, and he couldn't let everything slip out of control. As he neared the place where she was hiding, Lucas immediately grabbed his phone and dialed 911. 911, what is your emergency? The operator's voice was cold, but Lucas could feel the urgency in his own heart. I need help immediately. An intruder is attacking a woman and her child. They're inside the house, and he's very dangerous. Lucas couldn't hold back his emotions, his voice laced with concern. Please provide your address and a description of the intruder, the operator requested, calm yet urgent. Lucas immediately provided the exact address along with the details he had about the attacker. His name is Brad. He has a criminal record and he's very violent. I can't let him find them. He'll hurt them." "Understood. We will dispatch a police team immediately. Stay calm. We will coordinate with you to create a safe approach plan," the operator responded. "Thank you. I'll be nearby and I'll coordinate with you," Lucas replied as his eyes scanned the street corners. The police instructed him to create a diversion to prevent the attacker from detecting their presence. The plan was quickly mapped out. Lucas would approach the house from a different direction, while the police positioned themselves at strategic points, ready to surround and apprehend Brad. As Lucas neared the neighborhood, he couldn't help but feel the tension rise. He took a deep breath, trying to stay calm, and began to move quietly through the alley behind Emery's house. At this point, the police were already in position, hidden at various locations around the area. Lucas pulled out his phone and texted Emery, reminding her to remain silent and avoid drawing his attention. "He can't know I'm here. I'm very close, just a few minutes away," Lucas wrote, his hands still gripping the phone, his eyes never leaving the darkened house. Suddenly, he saw a shadowy figure. Brad. He was standing near the door, the street light illuminating his figure. A sense of dread washed over Lucas, but he knew this was not the time to be afraid. He moved quietly, making sure not to be seen, his eyes shifting to his police team. "All right, are you ready?" The commander's voice crackled through Lucas's earpiece. Lucas nodded, though the commander couldn't see him. "We're ready here," Lucas responded, and just a second later the police team simultaneously moved into position. They had surrounded the area, leaving Brad with no chance of escape. With perfect coordination, the police team approached and apprehended Brad just before he could do anything else. Lucas breathed a sigh of relief when he saw the police subduing the attacker, and Emery and Quinn were safe. "Emery!" Lucas ran into her house, his eyes searching for her safety. When he saw her and Quinn, he could finally relax. After the tense confrontation and the relentless moments of anxiety, Emery and Quinn's lives gradually found a new rhythm. Lucas, after everything that had happened, could not forget the worried and desperate look in Emery's eyes. Though she was someone he had never met before, he couldn't abandon her after everything she had gone through. In the following days, Lucas was not just the person who had helped her, but also the friend and confidant that Emery needed. He found ways to help her stand on her own feet again, teaching her to trust in life once more. First, he helped Emery find a stable job. He didn't just help her make a living, but also helped her regain the confidence she had lost over the years. Lucas rented a small house for her in a safe area where Emery and Quinn could start over without fear. He also helped Quinn find a school, providing her with a healthy environment to grow. Every day, Lucas checked in to ensure everything was going well, assisting Emery with whatever she needed, and creating a comfortable space for her to rebuild her life. Emery felt incredibly grateful, but at the same time, she couldn't help but feel a deep change within herself. It wasn't just because Lucas had saved her and Quinn, but because he helped her understand that life wasn't just the dark days she had endured. Then, after a long time of bonding, their friendship grew stronger. It was no longer just the relationship between a savior and the saved, but a true, powerful friendship that continued to blossom. Emery realized that no matter how difficult life might be, friendship and sincerity would always be the greatest strength to help her overcome any challenge. Together, the three of them, along with Quinn, continued their new life. Emery no longer felt alone, and Lucas understood that sometimes helping others was also a way to help oneself. Rediscover trust in life.